I'm sure that many of you have painted before, but I'm guessing that some of you haven't, and that's why you're here, to learn how to do it right. So I'm gonna give you some pro tips, I'm gonna give some tips for beginners, and walk you through every step of the process as simply as possible so that when you're done, you love your new space. As you can tell, we're all prepped to paint in this bedroom, and if you haven't checked out my How to Prep a Room for Paint video, you might wanna check it out right here. Prep is a step that's often overlooked, but it's super important. Our holes are patched, our trim is taped, our floors are protected, this room is ready to go. And for this project, I'm gonna be painting the walls and the trim. So let's start off by telling you how to choose a paint color and sheen. I always recommend going to Lowe's and grabbing a bunch of swatches in a color you like and bringing them home with you to see them in your actual space. They're gonna look different than they do in the store because the lighting in your room will be different. I like to tape them to the wall with painter's tape and leave them there for a few days before I start the project so I can see the colors at all different times of day with all different lighting. Once I choose my favorite color, I also grab a couple swatches that are a few shades lighter and a few shades darker. If I want to go a little darker or a little bit lighter, I already have options that are in the same color family. For this room, I chose Valspar's Juniper Breeze. It's a green color, but it isn't overly warm or too greeny. It actually almost reads like a green gray. And I want the trim to look super clean and crisp, so I'm going with Valspar's Ultra White. Okay, so we have your paint color now for the sheen. For our purposes in this room, we're gonna be using a flat finish for the walls. This is awesome for a beginner painter because it hides a lot of imperfections. Then we're gonna be using a semi-gloss for all the trim. This is kind of a go-to for any window casings, doors, trim, because it's super washable and it's also gonna be more reflective because of the higher gloss, so it draws your eye to it, making your paint job look awesome. So I picked my paint color, I've figured out my sheens, and now I need to determine how much paint I need for this room. The average gallon of paint will cover about 400 square feet of wall space. So we gotta do a little math to figure out how much wall space I have. Okay, so my friend Matt is a painter and he's helping me figure out exactly what the square footage of the walls are.
Yes.
So Matt, what are we dealing with here?
Well, we got 14 by 12 room, so with 8-foot ceilings. There's 416 square foot of wall space here, minus your doors, entrance door, your closet door, and your window behind us.
Okay, so 416 minus all that, we're well under 400.
Well under. 1 gallon is perfect for this room.
1 gallon is all we need. All right, so what about the trim?
There's 104 linear feet in this room.
Okay, so that includes like our baseboards, around our doors, around the windows, all of that.
Correct.
So 1 gallon of trim paint usually can cover 300 to 400 linear feet, so we're well under that.
Well, you're perfectly
We have
fine.
plenty of extra. And Matt, you always do 2 coats, right?
Yes.
Now, if this is sounding a little complicated, if math isn't your thing, no worries. There's an awesome, easy to use Lowe's calculator. It can help you calculate how much wall paint you need or how much trim paint, how to subtract out doors and windows. They make it really easy for you. Okay, so now we're on to opening the can. This one's pretty easy, and you can actually use a variety of different tools to do the job. Many homeowners will use a flathead screwdriver, or if you have your 5-in-1 tool, you could use that. You even could reach into your back pocket and use a quarter around the edge. Now, no matter which tool you choose to use, the biggest thing is that you wanna make sure that you are opening all the way around the can on all the sides. So I'm gonna go with my 5-in-1, and I'm just gonna use one hand to securely hold the gallon, and the other is going to put the 5-in-1 just under the lip. I'm gonna slip it in and then kind of torque it backwards a bit. And we have it off, and there's no damage done to the can at all. So I picked up this paint 2 days ago, and you can kind of tell that the tint and the base have separated a little bit, and I wanna make sure that I have nice, consistent coverage. So I'm gonna use my complimentary from Lowe's paint stir stick, and I'm gonna put this all the way to the bottom of my gallon, and I'm gonna slowly stir it up together. You wanna make sure that the base and the tint that they put in to create your custom color are perfectly mixed together. So we're gonna be painting the walls first. This is a preference thing. I talked about this in my How to Prep a Room for Paint video, that it's kind of hotly debated. Do you paint the walls first or the trim first? For an everyday kind of beginner homeowner, I'm gonna recommend that you do the walls first, and here's why. Sometimes when you're rolling, you might get some splatter to come off your roller onto your trim. So I've taped off the trim right now, and then that'll be the second thing that we do. That way it ensures that the final touches are clean, crisp, awesome trim. It'll make your entire paint job look great. For this space, we're using a Paint Plus primer. So that means we don't need to do a primer coat beforehand. Now, there's a few circumstances where you might need to if you're dealing with fresh drywall, or if you have some stains that you really need to block out, then maybe a primer would be a good option. We're gonna start by cutting in, and what that refers to is really focusing on the edges and the corner of the room using a paintbrush. We're gonna do that before we roll the walls. Since we're gonna be cutting in and working our way around the room, I like to transfer some of my paint into like a little handy bucket. And it even has a liner in here for easy cleanup. So I'm gonna transfer just some of my gallon into my pail and we'll start cutting in. If you have a space large enough and you think you'll definitely need at least 2 gallons of paint, I recommend boxing. This is a technique to ensure color consistency between different gallons of paint. You'll take a 5-gallon bucket and mix, then stir your paint together. This way, if there's any slight difference in color between the gallons, it won't matter when it's all combined to form one uniform color. For my brush when I'm cutting in, I prefer to use a 2-inch angled brush. Now, again, this is preference, but the angle allows me to control the paint a bit more. So when I'm coming into a spot where like my wall hits my ceiling or my walls hit my trim, I can be more precise with the paint. Now, when you are getting ready to cut in, you're gonna take your brush and you wanna load it with paint. Now, a common mistake is to overload your paint, to dip it in like many, many inches and just have paint all over. So what you wanna do is you wanna dip in and you only wanna get paint on the first inch of your brush or so. After you've dipped in the paint, you're gonna basically drag it along the edge of your can just to offload it, just offload a little bit on each side. Okay, we are finally ready to get some paint on the walls, and before I do it, I have a couple more tips for you. First of all is, how do you hold a paintbrush? And I know that seems basic, but let me tell you, I've seen a few people with the fist method, and it doesn't work very well. So the way I like to do it is I use my pointer finger as kind of my control and my guide, the same way that you would almost holding a pencil. And then resting my other fingers back here on the back side. The only things you want to keep in mind is that you want it to be comfortable for you, you want to have good control of your brush, and you don't want to grip it too tight. Okay, so I'm dipping, I'm offloading, and I'm going to start painting in a corner. That's kind of the easiest space. Now, when I'm painting, I'm getting pretty good coverage. When it starts getting spotty like that, you know you don't have enough paint on your brush. It's time to load. Also, if I were going like this, that's too much paint right there. If I get too much paint on, I just wanna use my brush and help feather it out. When I'm cutting this in, I roughly wanna go about 3 inches out from the corner in both directions. This way, when I come through with my roller can cover my edge line, but not get so close that it bangs the other wall. Now I'm gonna move down to my baseboard, and because we taped off our baseboards, my technique isn't quite as critical. It's not like I'm cutting in and need to have a perfectly straight line. It's okay to get paint on your tape. That was the whole idea. Around the windows, same deal as the trim. They're taped off so you don't have to worry about your brush touching. Another tip, when you're finished in a section, you wanna really give it a good once over. You wanna make sure that there's no drips or globs. They're so much easier to fix when they're wet, so hit them with the brush. If they dry, then you're getting into sanding, potentially spackling, and basically we're all the way back at how to prep a room for paint. We're focusing on cutting in all around our windows, our door frames, and our baseboards, and we're saving the ceiling for last. Matt's gonna show you how to cut in like a pro. So Matt is up here and he is cutting in, and dang, that looks straight. Okay, so what does it take to get this perfect cut line?
Well, it helps having a good angled brush. A new brush would be great. You just want to follow your tip along the wall meets the ceiling with a steady hand as slow as possible, and just reach it till you're out of paint, and then move down. And if you ever get anything on the ceiling, keep a wet rag with you, just wipe it off and you should be good to go. The one thing that I highly recommend is don't overload your brush with too much paint. You do not want to have too much on your top that it globs up onto your ceiling. So you always want to just have a nice little line, and then when you're done, just fan it downward so you don't wrap it onto your ceiling line.
All right, so we're totally cut in, and now we can finally move on to the walls. And to do that, we're gonna be using a paint roller. A roller is made up of 2 parts. Basically, you have your roller cage and then your roller cover, which is sometimes referred to as a roller head. And these two combine together to become your roller. Not all roller heads are the same, so we want to go over some of the basic, most like average homeowner ones that you might see and need to use.
Well, you have 3/8 nap right here. It's great for walls and ceilings. Smooth surfaces, drywall, most homeowner projects, it's perfect. You want a little more thicker for maybe a larger room. You can maybe your family room's a little bigger, something along those lines. You have a 1/2" nap, which will hold more paint. And then you really get into the 3/4 nap. That holds a ton. You do it for your stucco, decks, masonry, anywhere you need to really get in your nooks and crannies, you really get it in.
So Matt's referring to the nap, and that refers to the thickness of the roller cover. So a 3/4 nap, it's gonna be a lot looser, right? And a thicker, higher nap.
The rougher the surface, the thicker the nap you want to use, so it holds more paint and gets in more grooves.
So for this space, we are gonna go with the 3/8 inch nap. Another thing that you have some options in is actually the size of your cage and roller cover. So this is a 9" which is kind of typical for a bedroom, but roller cages do come in a variety of sizes. They have 2" and 4", which are great for doors and smaller surfaces, and even larger ones like 14 and 18 if you're doing a really big project. Okay, we're gonna be rolling these walls and working out of a paint tray. Now, the one thing to remember when you're choosing your tray is to make sure that it's the correct size for your roller. Once you have your tray, make sure that you also pick up a liner. Make sure it's the same brand so that they correspond and fit in together, but this is going to make your cleanup so much easier. You guys will thank me later. Basically, you wanna take it up to this top line. Okay, for loading your roller, here's what we're gonna do. You're going to dip it down into the paint, but resist the temptation to fully submerge it. I know that it is tempting. You're gonna roll back and forth to load up the paint. It's gonna take a couple rolls on the wall to fully saturate your roller and get it going. It almost needs like a couple passes to warm up. So I'll take it out and I'll go roll. How to roll a wall is a hotly debated topic. It probably always will be. So we're gonna show you a couple common techniques and explain how to do them and why people do them, and then you can choose the technique that works best for you. All right, so the first one is the V or the W, depends on who you ask. So this is kind of a basic homeowner technique, is that it offloads your paint kind of across the section, right? Instead of in one area.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of just want to roll it out. So you get rid of the W or V that you had.
Technique number 2 is going to be full strokes top to bottom, working your way over.
Yeah, so you just do up and down, long strokes, body length, just so everything blends in together. And once again, making sure you don't have any lines that overlap each other. So you'll just do a light pressure, that's it. Just going up and down like that. If you put too much pressure on, you'll start to get globs.
There's one more technique that's pretty common, and that's kind of blocking it top to bottom. This is basically the same method as we just did with the top to bottom all the way ceiling to floor, except you're gonna work in 2 sections.
Exactly. So you leave it like that in one section and then complete your
And
section.
you're going back over, kind of blending those 2 sections.
Correct. You want everything to blend so you don't have any lines that overlap each other.
So you can tell we just used 3 different methods: W, top to bottom, and then blocking, but it all looks the same. So the moral of the story is pick your preference, choose your technique, but as long as you're ending up with a great finished product, it doesn't matter which technique you use. Another common error is kind of having a roller line. This just means that you had too much paint either on your edge or that you're applying a little bit too much pressure and you're gonna end up with a bit of a ridge of paint. The biggest thing is to fix it while it's still wet. So to get rid of it, we're just gonna take a pretty dry roller, much less paint, and roll right over that with light pressure. That way your ridge disappears. Okay, so this area here is super common. It's what we call a holiday. And you can see it's just where the paint didn't go on quite evenly. You're just gonna back roll right over it, blending it into the paint around it. This one's pretty obvious, but other times you can't even really notice it on the first coat. So the second coat will take care of it all. All right, our walls are done and now it's on to trim. But first we need to remove our tape and we're gonna show you how to do it. Some people like to remove it right away. This is dried a little bit. It really doesn't matter. Again, it's a preference thing. The biggest thing is that when you're removing your tape, you pull it evenly and slowly so that it doesn't catch and ruin your paint job. All right, we're getting ready to paint our trim, and Matt went around the perimeter of the room and laid a strip of masking tape. This will protect the carpet and also press the carpet down just a bit so we can fully paint the trim. It's a good time to mention to you guys that there's a difference between masking tape and painter's tape. What I'm about to show you is using painter's tape. He used masking tape. I'm gonna show you how to tape off your walls as an optional step. Matt and I are actually going to cut in this room so we can show you that too. But if any of you want to tape it off, I'm gonna show you the process I would use. You need to wait until your paint is fully dried and cured. We're putting it directly on the wall, resting right where it meets the return of the trim. You don't actually have it on the trim at all, it's just meeting it, and all the tape is on the wall. And then the part that we care about sealing the most is right here along the trim. And if you want, you can use your 5-in-1 tool to kind of seal that in. All right, so we're ready to paint the trim. I have my interior semi-gloss extra white here in my handy pail, and I have another 2-inch angled brush, a clean brush, totally fresh. All right, hopefully you guys have checked out our how to prep a room for paint video, so you know that we have already cleaned and removed all the dust from this trim and from the baseboard. Otherwise, it could be a really yucky paint job. So make sure you don't skip that step. If you were to paint over dust, especially in the corners, it can just really muck it up. So what I like to do is basically put my brush here, just letting some of my bristles go up top onto the return, and with a smooth, even stroke, okay, get that, and then I work my way down, okay? And then when you go to paint the thicker direction, I keep a straight brush, and this is why we taped off nice smooth strokes there. All right, my paint job is done. I'm thrilled with how it's looking, but I just wanna show you guys how I put away my paint before I clear everything out of here. So I have my wall paint here. I take my lid, put it on the top, and I use a rubber mallet. I don't like to use a metal hammer because it can damage the edge and then your seal isn't great. I work my way around the edge. I'm applying firm pressure, but you don't wanna go too crazy on it, not too hard. You don't wanna dent the can. And then one little pro tip, I like to use a Sharpie marker and label the room and what it was for. So on this one, I'm gonna write bedroom number 2 and the walls right on the lid, and then that way I know exactly what it is. Also, if I ever wanted to know the color that I used in this room, because people are gonna love it so much they're gonna ask me what the color is, it's right there on top. And that, my friends, is the right way to paint a room. I hope you learned a lot and that you're super excited to have your own properly painted room that you love. Got questions or comments? Leave them below. And remember, do it right, start with Lowe's. Want to learn more? Be sure to check out the Lowe's YouTube channel for great step-by-step and how-to videos, and lowes.com/howto for all kinds of projects.